I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until the lawyer pushed the folder across the polished oak desk. "Emily," he said gently, "it's already been signed over. The property, the accounts, everything is in Jason's name now." The words didn't make sense. They floated in the air between us like smoke, curling and disappearing before I could catch them. I stared at him, waiting for the part where he'd laugh and say it was a clerical error. The part where I'd pull out my driver's license, prove who I was, and take home what my grandmother had promised me since I was old enough to understand the meaning of the word inheritance. But instead, his expression stayed fixed in that practice look lawyers wear when they're used to giving people bad news. Across the desk, my cousin Jason leaned back in his chair, one ankle resting over his knee, a self-satisfied smirk barely tugging at the corners of his mouth. He was wearing a designer watch I'd never seen before. Gold. Flashy. The kind of thing you'd only buy when you'd suddenly come into money. My voice cracked when I finally spoke. What do you mean everything is in his name? Grandma told me." Jason cut me off, his tone dripping with false sympathy. Come on." Grandma was confused toward the end. She wanted to make sure the estate stayed manageable. "You've got your own life, your own department. I'm already here, so it just made sense." Manageable. That was the word he chose. The lawyer cleared his throat. "The last will, signed and notarized 2 weeks before your grandmother's passing, leaves the house, the savings account, and all personal effects to Mr. Jason Miller. The only thing you receive is," he shuffled the papers, scanning them quickly, "a box of personal photographs. A box of photographs. Memories I already carried in my head, in my heart. Memories that didn't need a box." I felt my hands start to shake, and I shoved them under the table so neither of them would see. "This doesn't make sense," I whispered. "She told me." Jason leaned forward, his voice dropping low enough for only me to hear. "She told you a lot of things, Emily. People say stuff when they're dying. Doesn't mean it's binding." I could feel the sting in my eyes, but I refused to let the tears fall here. Not in front of him. Not when he'd already taken so much. The lawyer slid the final paper toward me. "If you'll just sign here acknowledging you've received notice of the will, we can conclude this meeting." The pen felt like lead in my hand. Every movement was slow, deliberate, like I was underwater. My signature looked foreign, jagged. When I put the pen down, my palm was damp. Jason stood up first, smoothing the front of his jacket. "No hard feelings, Em. You'll land on your feet. You always do." I didn't respond. Couldn't. When I finally stepped out into the gray February afternoon, the wind cut straight through my coat. Downtown Boston hummed around me, cars rushing past, people hurrying with paper cups of coffee, strangers laughing into their phones. The world kept moving, oblivious to the fact that my life had just been split into 2 parts, before today and after. I clutched my purse tighter and started walking, each step mechanical, my mind replaying his smirk, his tone, his words. A box of photographs. That was all I had left. And yet, somewhere deep under the numbness, a thought began to form, faint, almost imperceptible. They might have taken what was mine, but they hadn't taken me. When people talk about family, they often mean holiday dinners, birthday celebrations, and those blurry old photos where everyone's smiling like they actually liked each other. For me, family meant obligation, responsibility, quiet sacrifices no one asked me to make, but everyone counted on anyway. I grew up in a small Massachusetts town, the kind of place where the grocery store cashier knew your business before you did. My mom left when I was 10. Dad worked construction and had a bad back by 40, which meant the bills were always teetering between paid and past due. Grandma Ruth, my dad's mother, stepped in to help. She was my safe place. Her house smelled like cinnamon and laundry detergent, and her voice could cut through the worst days like a warm light. But even as a kid, I noticed things. How she always praised Jason's potential, even when he barely scraped through school. How my A's and perfect attendance were met with a nod, but his half-finished art project got clapped for like he'd won the Nobel Prize. Jason was the golden boy. Tall, charming in a used car salesman way, with a talent for making you feel like you were the most important person in the room, until you weren't. he could talk his way out of anything. And he often did. I, on the other hand, was steady, dependable, invisible. Some of my earliest memories with Grandma were in her kitchen, standing on a chair so I could reach the counter, helping her knead bread. "You've got your mother's hands," she used to say, looking at me with a softness I didn't see often. I thought that meant she saw me, that she understood me. When Dad's back gave out completely my junior year of high school, I picked up a part-time job at the diner after classes. I'd come home smelling like coffee and fryer oil, drop my tips on the kitchen counter, and head straight to Grandma's to check on her. Jason? He was finding himself, which mostly meant playing video games in his bedroom until 2 p.m. Still, at every family gathering, it was Jason they asked about first. "How's Jason doing?" "Jason, you're looking sharp. Got a girlfriend yet?" No one asked if I was tired, or if I was okay. When I got into Boston University on a partial scholarship, it was Grandma who insisted I live on campus, even though the dorm fees were steep. "You deserve a real college experience," she said, pressing an envelope of cash into my hand. "Don't tell your father." He'd try to give it back. It wasn't until years later I realized that envelope was probably the last of her savings. During my sophomore year, she had her first fall. Nothing serious, just a sprained wrist, but it rattled her. I started taking the train back every other weekend to help with groceries and laundry. Jason lived 15 minutes away and showed up maybe once a month, usually with some half-baked excuse about car trouble or work. Still, Grandma doted on him. On his birthday, she made his favorite lemon cake from scratch. Mine? She bought from the bakery because time got away from her. It stung, but I told myself it didn't matter. Love wasn't about keeping score. When Dad passed unexpectedly from a heart attack, I moved into Grandma's house for 6 months. She was grieving, and someone had to handle the bills, the maintenance, the constant stream of casseroles from neighbors who wanted to pop in. Jason came to the funeral in an expensive suit and left before the last guest had gone home. During those months, I learned everything about the house, which pipes needed watching in winter, which windows stuck in the summer, how the old maple out front dropped its leaves late. I thought maybe, one day, it would be mine. Not because I wanted things, but because it felt like a piece of my father. A piece of stability. When Grandma's health began to really decline, her knees giving her trouble, her memory slipping, I was the one who took her to every appointment. I made her tea when she couldn't sleep. I handled her medication schedule, labeled in neat handwriting. Jason? He called on holidays. Sometimes. One night, when she was particularly tired, she held my hand and said, "Emily, when I'm gone, I want you to have this house. You've kept it alive. You've kept me alive." I remember nodding, tears catching in my throat. "I'll take care of it, Grandma. I promise." But here's the thing about promises. They're only as strong as the paper they're written on. And in our family, paper could be altered. I didn't know Jason had started visiting more often in those last weeks. I didn't know he'd somehow convinced her to simplify things, to make it easier, by putting everything in his name. By the time I found out, it was too late. Looking back now, I can see all the signs. The way she'd mention how Jason's really stepping up. The fact that he started bringing her takeout from that fancy Italian place, smiling like the dutiful grandson. The way she'd stop mid-sentence sometimes, as if she was trying to remember something she meant to say to me, but couldn't. I told myself she'd never cut me out like that. That she wouldn't forget everything we'd been through. But she did. Or maybe someone made sure she did. I think that's what hurt the most. Not the money. Not even the house. It was the realization that in her final act, Grandma chose him. Or at least she thought she did. And I was left holding a box of photographs. The day after the will reading, I woke up to 3 missed calls from Aunt Linda and 1 text from Jason. The calls from Aunt Linda, I ignored. The text from Jason I opened, though I'm not sure why. I know yesterday was hard. Let's just keep this civil, okay? No reason to make things ugly. Grandma wouldn't have wanted that. Civil. Ugly. It was almost impressive how he could frame my grief as potential bad behavior. An hour later, Aunt Linda's number lit up my phone again. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Emily," she began, in that syrupy voice she reserved for funerals and PDA meetings. I wanted to check in. I know this is a shock. But sweetheart, you have to understand. Your grandmother thought this was for the best. For the best, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. How is leaving me with nothing for the best? She sighed, as if I were a stubborn child. You're young, you're working, you're independent. Jason needs stability. He's had some tough years. I closed my eyes, picturing Jason's tough years. The ski trips, the brand new truck, the nights out in Boston bars. Meanwhile, my independence had been built on diner shifts and student loans. I took care of her, I said, my voice quieter now. When she fell, when she couldn't drive anymore, I was there. There was a pause on the line. Then Aunt Linda said the thing that cracked something inside me. Emily, it's not personal. It's just easier this way. Not personal. The words landed like ice in my chest. By the end of the week, the rest of the family had picked their sides, or maybe they already had them. I got a Facebook message from a second cousin saying, "Hey, I heard about the will. That's rough. But Jason's been through a lot, you know?" Through a lot. I wanted to ask if any of them knew what it was like to sit up at 3 a.m. with an elderly woman who couldn't remember her own address. To coax her into eating soup when she insisted she wasn't hungry. To keep her dignity intact when she forgot how to work the shower. But I didn't respond. The first time I ran into Jason after the will reading was at the grocery store. I was standing in the produce aisle, staring at apples I couldn't afford to buy in bulk, when he appeared behind me. He said, clapping a hand on my shoulder like we were still kids. No hard feelings, right? I turned to look at him. He was wearing a new leather jacket, his hair freshly cut, the gleam in his eyes unbothered by the storm he'd left me in. Why? I asked. Just that one word. He shrugged. She wanted it this way. And then, with the audacity only Jason could manage, he added, honestly, we might not answer the door if you show up unannounced. Things are tense right now. Tense. As if I were the one who'd taken something that didn't belong to me. That night, I sat on my couch with the box of photographs they'd given me. There was Grandma holding me on my first day of kindergarten, her smile proud and bright. There was Dad grilling burgers in the backyard, a beer in his hand, and Jason hanging off his arm like a kid who'd never been told no. There was me, 17 years old, pushing Grandma in a wheelchair through the park after her knee surgery. I flipped through them slowly, my chest aching. They were trying to rewrite the story, to make it seem like I didn't matter, like my part in this family was smaller than it had been. And for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to prove them wrong. Something else was blooming inside me instead. Something quieter, but stronger. The final call came 2 days later. This time it was Aunt Linda again. Emily, honey, she began, we think it's best if you don't come by the house for a while. Give Jason space to settle in. You know, keep the peace. Keep the peace. I let her words hang in the air for a moment before answering. Sure, I said. I won't come by. There was relief in her tone. Good. I knew you'd understand. But she didn't understand. None of them did. Because I wasn't agreeing out of submission. I was agreeing because I had no intention of ever walking through that door again. And that was the moment, though I didn't know it yet, when the shift became permanent. Silence has a strange weight to it. In my family, silence was usually a punishment. Grandma used to go a whole afternoon without speaking if she was mad. My dad would stomp around the house after an argument, saying nothing for days. Silence meant you'd done something wrong. But this was different. This silence was mine. The first step was small. I deleted Jason's number from my phone. Not blocked, just erased. No more temptation to send the messages I'd been drafting in my head. You know what you did. Hope you can sleep at night. This won't make you happy. I deleted Aunt Linda's number too. Then my uncle's. Then the cousin who had sent me that backhanded Facebook message. One by one, I untethered myself. Next came the bank transfers. For years, I'd been sending Grandma a little extra each month to help with groceries, even after I'd moved into my apartment in Boston. I told myself it was just what family does. Now, the automatic transfer was canceled with a single click. My checking account looked the same, but I felt lighter. I stopped going to the neighborhood diner when I visited my hometown. Too many familiar faces, too many people who might stop me to say they'd heard about the will in that half-sympathetic, half-gossipy tone. I started buying my coffee at a place 2 towns over instead. I didn't post about any of it online. No cryptic quotes. No vague updates. If they wanted to know where I'd gone, they could wonder. At night, I'd walk through my apartment in the quiet. I'd notice the way the streetlights spilled through the blinds, the hum of the radiator, the stack of books on my coffee table I'd been meaning to read. Without the constant buzz of family obligation, there was space. Space to think. Space to breathe. And in that space, a seed of an idea began to grow. One Saturday afternoon, I opened the box of photographs again. This time, I wasn't looking for proof of what I'd lost. I was looking for reminders of who I'd been all along. There was a picture of me at 16, teaching a neighbor's kid to ride a bike. One of me at 21, volunteering at a food pantry. Another of me and Grandma in her garden, planting tomatoes. The photos told a story my family couldn't erase. I had always been someone who built things. Not for credit, not for applause, but because I couldn't stand to see something or someone fall apart. So, I started making lists. Not of grievances. Not of ways to get even. Lists of what I wanted to create. What I wanted to leave behind. A scholarship fund for kids in my hometown. A community garden. A mentorship program for first-generation college students. None of it existed yet. But writing it down felt like taking the first step towards something that was mine, untouchable by Jason or anyone else. A month after the will reading, Aunt Linda left me a voicemail. "Emily, we haven't heard from you. Jason's asking if you're okay. We should all get together soon. Put this behind us." I listened to it twice, then deleted it without responding. There was power in not explaining myself. Power in letting the phone ring. Power in choosing who got access to me. For the first time in my life, my silence wasn't fear. It was freedom. Emily stood in front of her bedroom mirror, dressed in a simple white blouse and dark jeans. Her hair was pulled back into a neat ponytail, but her mind was anything but neat. It was cluttered with thoughts, questions, and the sharp memory of the moment she realized the truth about Michael's betrayal. She had replayed that day over and over in her mind, but this morning felt different. Today, she wasn't just replaying the past, she was preparing for the future. Sarah had told her last night, "Don't let fear control you, Em. You have more strength than you realize. Today is your chance to take control of your life." The words echoed in her head now like a mantra as she picked up her phone and stared at Michael's number. She wasn't going to call him, at least not yet. First, she needed to confront another truth that had been lingering at the back of her mind. Who else knew? The thought made her stomach twist. If Michael had gone to such lengths to hide this, maybe someone in his inner circle had been helping him, or at least covering for him. Her gut told her there was more to the story, and Emily had learned to trust her gut. With her car keys in hand, she headed out the door and drove toward downtown. She had arranged to meet Daniel, one of Michael's old business partners, at a quiet coffee shop. Daniel had always been friendly toward her, and she hoped that meant he might finally tell her the truth. The coffee shop smelled of roasted beans and warm pastries, but Emily hardly noticed. Her eyes scanned the room until she spotted Daniel sitting near the window, his hands wrapped around a mug. When he saw her, he offered a polite smile, but there was something guarded in his expression. "Emily," he greeted, standing up. "It's been a while." "Too long," she replied, sitting across from him. "Daniel, I'm going to be straight with you. I know about Michael's secret account." Daniel froze, his fingers tightening around the mug. "I see. You've worked with him for years," she continued, "and I know you've probably seen things. I'm not here to attack you. I just need to understand. How long has he been hiding money?" Daniel glanced toward the counter, as if to make sure no one was listening. "Emily, Michael's been making moves behind the scenes for almost 2 years. He told everyone in the company that it was for business opportunities, but I suspected it was personal. I didn't ask questions because, well, you don't ask questions when you work with someone like Michael." Her chest tightened. "And you never thought to warn me?" "I thought maybe it wasn't my place," Daniel said quietly. "But if you're asking me now, then I'll tell you, he's not just hiding money. He's making plans to disappear from certain obligations. And Emily, you might be one of them." The words landed like a punch to her ribs. Her mind swirled, but beneath the shock was a growing fire. This wasn't just betrayal, this was abandonment in the making. She thanked Daniel for his honesty, even if it had come far too late, and walked out of the coffee shop with a clear thought. Michael wasn't going to get away with this. The rest of the day felt like moving through molasses, but every slow step was a step closer to her plan. She called Sarah and told her everything. Together, they decided the only way forward was to gather evidence, enough to protect herself legally and financially before Michael made his next move. By the time night fell, Emily sat at her desk, her laptop open, files scattered around her. She was tired, yes, but for the first time in weeks, she felt powerful. The fear was still there, but now it was matched with determination. Michael might think he could control the story, but Emily was about to prove otherwise. The clock on the wall seemed louder than ever, each tick hammering in the tension that filled the air. Emily sat on her couch, staring at the sealed envelope that had arrived earlier that morning. Her hands trembled, and her heart thumped like a drum in her chest. This was it, the answer she had been waiting for. She could hear Sarah's voice in her head from the night before. "Whatever it says, remember, you're stronger than you think." That encouragement gave Emily the push she needed to tear open the envelope. Her eyes scanned the first few lines, and the words made her stomach twist. It was confirmation, photographic evidence, financial statements, and personal notes. Mark had not only been hiding money, he had been planning an entirely separate life. Emily's breath caught. She felt anger, betrayal, and heartbreak all at once. But underneath that storm of emotions, there was something else, clarity. The truth, though painful, gave her a strange sense of relief. She wasn't imagining things. She wasn't paranoid. Everything she had felt in her gut had been real. She picked up her phone and called Sarah. "It's worse than we thought," she whispered. Sarah immediately offered to come over, her tone fierce with loyalty. By the time Sarah arrived, Emily had already begun gathering Mark's things into boxes. Each sweater, each pair of shoes, felt like removing a piece of the lie from her home. She wasn't just cleaning, she was reclaiming her space. When Mark came home that evening, his face froze as he saw the boxes. Emily stood tall, her voice steady. "I know everything, Mark, and I'm done." He tried to speak, but she raised her hand to silence him. "You had your chance to be honest. Now I'm taking mine to walk away." For the first time in a long time, Emily felt powerful. This was her story now, and she was the one writing the ending. The morning after confronting Mark, Emily woke to sunlight spilling across her bedroom. For the first time in months, she noticed how warm and peaceful it felt. There was no weight pressing on her chest, no constant dread of what she might discover next. The storm had passed, at least inside her heart. Mark had left without much of a fight. Perhaps he realized the evidence was undeniable. Perhaps he knew that Emily's resolve was unshakable now. Either way, his absence felt like an open window after a long, suffocating winter. Emily made coffee and sat by the kitchen table, pen in hand, writing a list of everything she needed to do. First, she would meet with a lawyer to discuss protecting her assets. Then, she would close any joint accounts and change all her passwords. She was done being vulnerable to someone who had used her trust as a weapon. Sarah came over again, armed with croissants and her unwavering support. They sat together, sipping coffee, making plans for a weekend getaway once things settled down. "You deserve a fresh start," Sarah said with a smile. Emily knew she was right. In the days that followed, Emily threw herself into small acts of freedom. She redecorated the living room, swapping out the old couch they'd bought together for one she had always wanted. She enrolled in a photography class she had postponed for years because Mark didn't think it was practical. Each change felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. One afternoon, she stumbled upon a framed picture of her and Mark at a holiday party. For a moment, she hesitated. Memories still carried a sting. But instead of breaking down, she simply removed the frame's backing, took out the picture, and replaced it with a photograph she had taken of a sunrise last winter. A quiet symbol of moving forward. Emily understood now that healing wasn't about erasing the past, it was about rewriting the future. And she was ready to do exactly that. Weeks turned into months, and Emily found herself stepping into a life that felt entirely her own. The heaviness that once clung to her had been replaced with a quiet strength she didn't even know she possessed. Her lawyer had helped her secure her finances, ensuring that Mark could never again touch what she had built. She had closed the chapter on the house they once shared, selling it and moving into a sunlit apartment overlooking the city. The view wasn't just beautiful, it was a daily reminder that she had risen above the shadows. In her new home, the walls were decorated with her own photographs. City lights shimmering in the rain, children laughing in the park, golden fields under a summer sky. She realized that through her lens she was learning to see beauty again, not because life was perfect, but because she had decided to look for it. Sarah remained her rock, but Emily had also made new friends through her photography class. They laughed over coffee, shared creative projects, and reminded her that life could be vibrant and spontaneous again. One evening, as she walked home from a gallery where one of her photos had been displayed, Emily passed by a couple holding hands. She didn't feel bitterness or envy, only gratitude. Gratitude that she had learned to love herself enough to walk away from someone who didn't value her. Gratitude that she now understood her worth wasn't tied to anyone else's approval or honesty. Standing by her apartment window, city lights twinkling like scattered stars, Emily whispered to herself, "I am free." The betrayal had once felt like an ending, but now she knew it had been the beginning. Emily had rebuilt her life, piece by piece, and those scars remained. They were no longer marks of weakness. They were proof of survival. She wasn't just moving on. She was moving forward, with her head high and her heart open to whatever came next. And this time, she would never again let someone dim her light. Months later, Emily sat in her favorite cafe, sipping a warm latte while flipping through her journal. Between the pages were handwritten entries, sketches, and photographs, a timeline of her transformation. Each page reminded her of moments when she thought she couldn't go on and how she did anyway. She thought about Mark, not with anger, but with a distant detachment. He had once been the center of her world, but now he was just part of a chapter she had already closed. She had heard, through a mutual acquaintance, that his secret bank account had eventually caused him trouble. Old lies had a way of catching up, and Emily felt no need to involve herself. His consequences were his own. Her phone buzzed. It was Sarah, sending a photo of the two of them at the beach, wind in their hair, both laughing so hard their eyes were closed. Emily smiled. That was the woman she had become, free, joyful, unafraid of the unknown. She realized something profound. The betrayal had not broken her. It had, in an odd way, given her the gift of clarity. She now understood that trust was precious, that self-worth couldn't be negotiated, and that starting over wasn't the end of the world. It was a chance to create one she actually wanted. As she packed up her things and walked outside, the air was cool, the city alive with motion and light. She felt the energy of possibility all around her. Somewhere, her future was unfolding, and she was ready for it. Every uncertain, exciting moment of it. Emily knew that love might find her again someday. But until then, she wasn't waiting for anyone to complete her. She was already whole. With the wind brushing against her face, she whispered, almost like a promise to herself. No more secrets. No more shadows. From here on, it's all light. And with that, she stepped forward, into a life entirely her own, with nothing left to hide and everything left to live for.